Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 3. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, as both coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank those of you who have liked, shared, and commented. Your support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guest today. And I'm excited. In this week's episode, I'm joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Andy Deck, a former GA, roommate, training partner, and great friend of mine. Andy is a doctor of physical therapy at Direct Performance Physical Therapy in Virginia Beach. Andy started his career as an intern in the Virginia Tech Strength Conditioning Department before working in the private sector as a personal trainer and then as a GA at Salisbury University. Following his graduate studies, he held various rehab tech positions at both Pivot and Innovative Physical Therapy before earning his doctorate and arriving at his current position. Meanwhile, Andy is also a professional strongman, earning his pro card in 2010. He's also an elite FTS sponsored athlete with over 15 years experience in strength sports. He's a true veteran of strongman with over 45 competitions under his belt and posting 33 podium finishes from the local level all the way up to international level, including being crowned 2018 USS middleweight national champion and competing at the under 105 kilo world's strongest man in 2018. He's also competed in Highland Games, Highlander, and powerlifting throughout his career, and has also served as the Maryland State Rep for U.S. Strongman Federation and North American Strongman Corporation for over 8 years. I'm stoked to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get into the game with Dr. Andy Deck. What's going on, everybody? I'm here with my good buddy and former training partner, still training partner, and now Dr. Andy Deck, who is a doctor of physical therapy at Direct Performance Physical Therapy in Virginia Beach, a professional strongman and elite FTS sponsored athlete, a good friend, and it's great to have you on the podcast, bud.
It's good to be here.
Yeah, like I said, I could go on and on about your resume for a long time and kind of list all your accomplishments, all your competitions, kind of everything you've got to up to this point. But really, I want to kind of start at the foundation, like what sports you grew up playing, how you got involved in training, and what kind of led you to pursuing strongman, especially professionally.
I played football and wrestled in high school. Briefly played soccer prior to like middle school when I was a peewee, but and then was pretty good at those. Was all state in both of those actually, and then did track my senior year just to throw shit. Oh, can I cuss on this?
Yeah, go for it.
Son of a bitch!
It's all your story. We're just along for the ride. Go for it.
Hey. No, I threw shot and discus, and then got second at states in that, and missed actually being an All-American in wrestling by losing my last match ever in overtime, which sucked balls. I don't recommend it. So did not play any sports in college, interned with Virginia Tech Strength and Conditioning. And toward the end of that, I actually ran a strongman contest for that the VT Rec Sports put on, and testing out some of the equipment and some of the events before and after, just like something clicked in my head. I was like, oh, this is really cool, especially when I picked up an Atlas Stone for the first time. And so that's getting ahead. But yeah, football and wrestling mostly, through stuff my senior year only.
No, that's cool. I know you've done a lot of stuff. You've dabbled in powerlifting. You've done Highlander competitions and Highland games too. So it's kind of cool to see.
Motherland.
You have to. I know you're full blown. So you're full blown Scottish. So you gotta support the kilt and throw some stuff, which is cool based off your background, like getting involved in throwing and track and field in high school. So it's a perfect kind of segue into throwing stuff in a field with a kilt. So,
Couldn't
and
be better.
yeah, you kind of touched on it too. Like you ended up choosing strongman, and you've had a very successful career in that, and you've had your pro card for going on 10 years, well, full 10 years now, and
Well, 10 years, yeah.
10 years, yeah. And then you were the 2018 middleweight national champion, and you went and actually competed at World's Strongest Man for 105 under kilo.
The world's strongest man.
Yeah, the minier version of it, which is still saying something, since all those guys you compete against are, if they were 6 inches taller, they'd probably be on the big stage.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But you kind of said it when you first ran that competition. I know you were the Maryland State chair for 8 years in two different classifications. Besides that, was there anything that really drew you to strongman, or anybody specifically that kind of showed you the ropes that really piqued your interest?
Nope. I mean, I watched it on ESPN like everybody else, and I thought it was exceedingly cool. And I had no idea there was such thing as amateur strongman until, like I said earlier, I was rec special event supervisor for rec sports at Virginia Tech, and one of the other guys who worked for rec sports wanted to have us host a strongman competition because VT already did a bench press competition. They did 5K and all this other stuff. And we did it. And then he told me, he was like, oh yeah, they have amateur strongman. They have weight classes and everything, team division, all this stuff. So I was like, oh, that's really cool. And I ran the first one, like I said, had not competed before, but just kind of did the scorekeeping and got the event set up and all that stuff. And then the following year after I graduated Virginia Tech, I went back and competed in the second one they had. And that was, I was actually going to be, because I was fat and didn't know anything about cutting weight at the time, so I was going to be heavyweight, but I was the only heavyweight who signed up, and my options were either compete by myself and win first place against nobody, which I didn't want to do, or go out of the open division, drop down to the novice division and compete there, because the novice was combined light and heavyweight. So I did that, and I won that competition, and that was kind of, I tore a bunch of skin off my hands and my forearms doing stones. I thought it was really cool, and then I went to some kind of engagement party for one of my friends after. I was like bleeding through my white dress shirt the whole night, and he was like, dude, stay away from my parents. They think you're really weird, because, you know, I looked like I might have murdered somebody earlier in the day. Moved to Maryland after I graduated from Tech, and was working out and just kind of got bored with everything. So looked around for a strongman competition, found one, and then August 2006 did my second strongman competition, which was my first sanctioned strongman competition with, at the time, it was North American Strongman, which was the only federation at the time. And got fourth in that one, tore a bunch of skin off my hands doing farmers because the handles got hot out in the sun. Would have left after the second event when I tore all the skin off my hands if I hadn't had a friend there with me. Finished the competition, got fourth, got a trophy because they gave trophies for fourth, for 4 places, not 3 at the time. And for about 2 weeks while my hands were effed up, I swore I would never do another competition. It was the stupidest thing I've ever done. And then my friend Steve expressed interest in training, and that was it. But as far as like anyone who kind of showed us the ropes, we literally, there was almost no literature at the time. So, I mean, I have a couple very, very obscure books on strongman training, and a DVD that actually one of my teammates, my elite FTS teammates, CJ Murphy at TPS up in Boston, put together a DVD on strongman training that I have. But most of it we literally just did by watching World's Strongest Man on ESPN and the handful of YouTube videos that people had. And none of it was even training. It was all competitions at the time. So it was pretty much make it up as you go along.
I like it. I mean, I think if I didn't have you and Mike kind of around when I first started training strongman, I probably would have never known about it other than the once at 3 a.m. when them putting 2 years ago World's Strongest Man on TV. So I think the resources that have kind of been available, and now it's starting to get a little bit more mainstream, and there's now multiple federations, different weight classes, worlds, nationals, and everything. It's starting to become a little bit more popular, and you can even see implements and stuff in different facilities, but it's still never lost its roots. And I think that's why both you and I still train kind of solo for the most part. It still is pretty niche, and it's kind of in the shadows of the strength sports world. But now go ahead. What'd you say?
No, I definitely think it's getting more mainstream with increased TV coverage. With more federations, there's multiple national championships now. They've got worlds for women, they've got worlds for men, they've got worlds for different weight classes. Heavyweight, obviously, World's Strongest Man, 105 kilos, 90 kilos. I think they have 86 kilo worlds now. If they don't, I'm sure they will soon. I think that's going to be the new lightweight class eventually, and they'll make a new pro card. But because when I won my pro card, it was a lightweight pro card, and then like 3 or 4 years later, they switched 105 kilograms, which is 231 pounds, to middleweight. So now technically there is no lightweight. There are no lightweight pros. There's only middleweight and heavyweight pros. So I think lightweight's coming. They might make 90 a lightweight, but I think they'll go lighter and do 86 because 90 already has worlds. But yeah, there's Masters Worlds, there's Pro Masters Worlds, there's like as it gets bigger and bigger, I think it gets a lot more exposure. And I mean, you can find now strongman equipment in most gyms you go to, even if it's just they have a yoke over in the corner, or they have a 2-inch bar, an axle, a fat bar, whatever you want to call it, or they have a log, even if it's a crappy 8-inch log or 10-inch log or something. So it's definitely getting a lot more mainstream, and most people are at least familiar with it now compared to how it used to be when it was only on ESPN. Well, as far as people knew, it was only on ESPN.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's your testament to some of your write-ups and like what Clint Darden and Zach Allman and like especially what a lot of elite FTS ends up putting out as information has kind of helped it skyrocket a little bit, and then big companies kind of now sponsoring it, which has kind of been big. But I wanted to kind of transition into what your training looked like in the beginning when you were competing locally to how it's kind of evolved to earning your pro card and now competing internationally. Were there a lot of changes within that, or honestly, were you just getting more adapt to how to prepare better for strongman?
I wouldn't say there's been a lot of changes. I mean, from the very beginning, yes, because the very beginning, literally, we didn't have a lot of equipment. So we would train, say, one weekend. We've always trained, 2 or 3 or 4 events, usually 3. And say one weekend we did farmers and we worked up to 200 pounds. And we would literally come back the next week and do 3 work runs, and the top run, if we did 200 pounds last week, try to make it 205 or 210 the next week. And every single week we could add weight that way because it was literally just letting our bodies learn the movements and the events and figure out how to do it. And it was really easy to add weight to what we were able to do for several months initially with yoke and farmers. Not as much with log. Generally, most people have done overhead pressing before. They probably have exhausted their newbie gains for it, and the log is really awkward in the first place. So, I mean, that goes up, but a lot slower than stuff like the moving events. And then Atlas stones, actually, me and no one I trained with had for the first 3 years that we trained. So literally the only time we would do Atlas stones was at competition, and I sucked at Atlas stones until I got Atlas stones. Like sandbag, keg, they kind of work as analogs, but it's not the same. So the only way to get better at Atlas stones is to do Atlas stones. And then once I got Atlas stones, they got a lot better. So.
No, you kind of touched on it too. I think one of the big kind of keys to success for strongman is you really have to just do it. You have to get your hands on the implements. You have to be involved in it, and you have to train a very different type of way than what you're normally doing in the gym. We both have seen it in competitions, guys that are the weight room heroes come out and actually put their hands on what real farmers handles are, what a real yoke is, what a real log is, and they just crumble. They don't understand that this is completely different, which is, in my opinion, one of the most important factors of actually competing successfully at strongman. Throughout your career, is there anything else that you've found is a big key indicator for having success over the long term?
I would say don't max all the time and don't do events all the time. That is one thing I've never really done, and it's when I see people do it, usually they don't last in strongman especially, but in strength sports in general. Is like I've always just trained events once a week. I mean, when I do overhead press during my normal gym days during the week, I'll usually do log because I used to suck at log a lot and I want to get better at it. But that's just using a log for overhead, and I don't train yoke and stones and farmers and all that stuff during the week. And anytime I have tried to do it, it's always ended badly because strongman is stupid. It is the dumbest of all the strength sports. You are literally doing what all the other strength sports do, and either doing it for reps or picking up the weight and then walking with it instead of just picking it up once or squatting it or deadlifting it. And it is really, really hard on your body, and it's hard to recover from. So, I mean, I guess if you had no job and you had a lot of money and you could just like recover and eat and train all the time, like in Europe and other countries in the world where they value athletes, it might work. But here where people have jobs and they have to work and they just do this for fun, it may work short term for some people, but the people I've seen try to do it long term, it doesn't work. And whenever I've even tried to do it short term, it doesn't work. When I was training with you at Salisbury and we were doing those speed farmers walks pre-training, that was a nightmare.
Never again.
And that was how I separated my shoulder for the first time and only time. So yeah, just it's too much to recover from. And when you try to push it with farmers and yoke and that kind of stuff, it just ends up getting injured and stuff gets worse, not better.
No, that makes sense. I think the big unique thing about strongman, even though it's been around for a while, and I like the history of it, and from it going from circus performers to kind of nowadays where it's pro, but even back then when it was a test of strength and everything for Viking heritage, and even before that, there's bits and pieces all across the world of where it kind of evolved. And there's no real true textbook of how to train properly for strongman. Every guy starts putting out their own kind of version of it, but there's no cut and dry. There's no 5-3-1 for a strongman. There's none of those mainstream ones. And you kind of took the same path with now your current position as a physical therapist. How is going from being a history major to kind of personal training, working with the private sector, to being a college strength coach as a GA, and now a physical therapist working with athletes in a rehab setting a lot. How have those kind of various experience helped you in your position and your training kind of evolve?
Definitely everything. All those, not as much the history degree. History degree, I just got really good at writing papers, I think. That was the main thing that got me. But when I got the history degree, I was actually majoring in history, and then I finished that in 3 years, and then I was majoring in exercise science and had a minor in political science and a minor in Spanish, and I was thinking about a minor in something else. And I got really sick of school, so I dropped everything and just said, screw it, I'm just going to graduate with history. Otherwise, I'm never going to graduate. So I did. And then I feel like the private sector stuff and the strength coach stuff and GA stuff, all that has immensely helped me. Well, everything I've done previously has always helped me with what I'm doing currently. So there's plenty of like people who want to be strength coaches or personal trainers or even PTs, a lot of people who are PTs who don't know how to teach people how to do exercise, who don't know how to coach people or groups of people, teams to do exercises and how to watch what they're doing, correct what they're doing. So I feel like it takes hundreds of hours. Like when I first started, I remember my first personal training job was at Virginia Tech also, and I knew nothing. And I programmed for everybody the way I programmed for myself, and that was it, because that was all I knew. And I mean, granted, at least I was doing what I knew, which was good, and not trying to do stuff I had no idea about. But I knew nothing. But working with people, the more I watched people, the more I could see differences in how they moved. And then the more I learned about kinesiology and physiology and anatomy, and then eventually rehab, physical therapy, the more injuries, the more I can tell like, oh, you're doing this because of this. You're doing this because of this. So it really helps identify exactly why people do move the way that they move, and then how to make them move better or feel better moving so they have less pain and they can perform better. But it's the amount of people in any job, whether it's in the private sector, as a personal trainer, as a strength coach, if it's in high school or college athletics, professional, probably not professional athletics, but high school and college athletics, and then definitely in the rehab setting, who have little to no idea of how to actually teach people to do things because they've never done them themselves, is appalling. And I think everybody who works with people in that setting should be training, or at least working, very least working out, but preferably training for something, whether it's, I don't care if it's a 5K or a bodybuilding competition or a Tough Mudder or half marathon or strongman or CrossFit, or the sport formerly known as CrossFit, I guess, or powerlifting. I don't care. Highland Games, Highlander, whatever you want to do, weightlifting, all of it. Train for something and you will get better, and you will be a better coach or therapist or chiropractor or personal trainer or whatever because of what you do.
Yeah, you answered my next question. You pretty much summarized the whole purpose behind why I really wanted to start these conversations and this show. And it's that right there. It's that if you're going to be a coach, you're going to be a physical therapist, if you're in any way going to be imparting your experience, your wisdom, and your philosophy with an athlete or someone in a rehab setting, just a person in general, you need to know what they're going through, and you need to have gone under the bar. You need to train specifically. And there's a big difference between training and just working out. And you need a goal in mind. You need to understand what the struggle is. You need to know what you're telling your athletes, that you have the capability, you have the experience to call upon that and give that information to them in a meaningful way and be able to relate to them and have some empathy. So you touched on that perfect. And then you was a perfect segue to what I kind of wanted to talk to you about when you initially started at VT and you were doing personal training. You said you were only programming basically exactly how you were training. And that's what I did when I first started interning and I was copying all I would do was copy what you and Mike were programming. And I was like, this is all I know. So this is all I can do. So considering your athletic background and what you know now and your training philosophy, do you incorporate like strongman movements and maybe even implements a little bit with your clientele in the physical therapy setting?
If it's appropriate, yes. And it definitely is. FYI, my internet connection is unstable.
You're good
I
to
just
go.
kind of messed on my screen, so if I cut out, I apologize. But no, if it's appropriate, I definitely do. I think one of the most helpful things actually for a lot of rehab, and it's very actually common even at where I used to work, a lot of people did it. Things in rehab is farmer's walks, either unilateral or bilateral. You get a lot of anti-rotation, anti-side bending, anti-extension, anti-flexion, anti-everything, just stabilization work from doing it. Depending on if you're doing one hand or two hand, it does change the muscle recruitment between the hips and the trunk muscles. But that's one that I do use a lot with a lot of different patients for a lot of different things. It might be low back, it might be hip, it might be shoulder, mid back, so hip flexors, a lot of different things you can use that to help. I have yet to do yoke with anybody in physical therapy, just because I have people who've asked to do it, but the people who've asked to do it, it's inappropriate to accidentally load them like that. But I mean, I've done log, circus dumbbell, chain yoke press, all with people. Never done stones or tire yet. I mean, I will if I get more strongwoman athletes or people who just want to do it, who it's appropriate for. I definitely will if I think it'll help them. But that's one of the kind of lines you have to walk in rehab is, you want to load people up, but at the same time, you got to sometimes hold them back so they don't jack themselves up before they're ready.
Oh, exactly.
Which is the same thing you have to do yourself, which is really hard to take your own advice when you're hurt. But no, I definitely use different strong, or even like regressions. I use a lot of sleds with my patients, pushes, pulls, forward drags, backward drags, high handles, low handles, all kinds of different various sleds versus, like a tank or something like that. So a lot of that with a lot of patients. I won't say everybody, but most people get some kind of sled work because that helps almost everyone with almost everything to some degree. So
yeah, I love to hear that. I mean, I knew you were going to say that pretty much, but it's nice for you to reiterate that to the audience and everything, that low level strongman stuff. I mean, outside of some of the really kind of weird things like maybe keg press or log or stones. Yeah. Outside of some of those ones, any other low level movements, farmers, yoke in some capacity, but a lot of carrying events and everything like that, especially sleds and prowler, those are perfect GPP things for general population, for athletes returning for rehab, for pretty much any sport in general. Those things across the board are going to be helpful in some capacity. So,
and a lot of people are deconditioned when they come out of, or as they are rehabbing. So that helps them get back that cardiovascular aspect of it that they probably have declined on to some degree during their rehab.
Right. Yeah. With that being said too, what are some of the biggest things that you believe in a rehab setting that athletes are lacking? Like either when they come to you before an injury or when they come to you and they are actually hurt, what are some of the biggest issues that you're tending to see trend across the board?
It sounds stupid and it sounds like it shouldn't be the case, but one of the most frequent things I see, and it's almost annoying because at this point, like, you think you've heard it so much and there's been so much information out on it that everybody's going to be addressing this part of their training or whatever, but is warming up. Like I would say of the athletes I treat, more than half of them, when I ask them what they do to warm up, whether it's warm up before running, warm up before squatting, warm up before any of their workouts or training, before practice, they're like, I just kind of jog for 5 minutes and then I go. Or my warm up for squatting is squatting the bar and then I go. I'm like, stop. And then half the time, all we have to do is get them a good warm up, like dynamic warm up and general warm up, to get them going, and they feel fine and they can do the movement fine. And they can keep doing those movements to warm up, and it will help them stretch things, strengthen things, and be like basically rehab and prehab before they do the stuff that they can't do because they're hurt. Runners especially, they don't warm up. They just start running. And as soon as you give them like 3 to 5 movements to do to warm up, they're like, oh yeah, it feels a lot better. I'm like, good, keep doing it.
Exactly.
And it may not work forever, because everybody, if they run or lift weights or do stupid strength sports long enough, like you change, your strengths change, your joints change, literally. You get older, you get stronger, you get weaker, stuff gets tighter. Your ability, you stop stretching for the last year and a half because of life stuff and you didn't have time to do it, so everything gets tighter. There's a lot of stuff that changes, so your warm-up needs to change periodically too. And what you do today probably shouldn't be the same warm-up you're doing 2 years from now, but you'll probably use parts of it, and you can switch stuff in and switch stuff out as you go. And the more the more you're able to kind of say, oh, my hip flexors feel really tight, maybe if I stretch them out, oh, that didn't work, okay, well, let me do some band marches and see how that feels. Oh, that feels a lot better. They're looser. They're firing better. So then, the more different stuff you know how to do, the easier it is to change things around to basically be prehab and be able to do what you want to do without having to go to rehab. Or if you do get hurt, be able to address it yourself without having to go to PT or chiropractor or your trainer or strength coach or whatever, athletic trainer, so that save some money and address it yourself and see if you can at least start to fix it if it's not too bad. Obviously, if you pull a rotator cuff, you probably need PT. If you had surgery, you definitely need PT. But the more you can do to help yourself, the better. And that's what I try to teach everybody.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's pretty surprising that I don't know why a warm-up would be the first thing almost cut out of anybody's program. I think it's just not sexy, and no one really wants to address some of those issues. They just want to get right into the fun part of the meat and potatoes. And warm-up is probably your first line of defense before you actually have to get injured or have to see you for rehab. But I like what you mentioned about like actually going through and progressing your warm-up from year to year, or as soon as you become proficient, you're learning new things. So it's not just stagnant. And then even if you don't have to be a coach or a physical therapist or anybody with a deep background to understand what your body specifically needs. So if you're learning new things along the way, you can make sure that your warm-up addresses you specifically before, like you said, you have to get hurt. Eventually, if you're in the sport long enough, you're going to see some sort of type of injury, and then you're going to need an expert. Whether or not you're smart enough to actually seek an expert like me, which I definitely, that's not my favorite thing to do. I don't heed my own advice a lot of the time. So that's definitely something I'm trying to work on and reach out to people like you that know a little bit more of what's going on and can finally tell me to just stop doing something stupid.
Don't make it up.
Exactly. Unfortunately,
having trained for so long, competed for so long, and even before I ever started strongman, I've had many injuries. I mean, wrestled for 6 years, played football for 5 years, threw track, lifted weights. I've torn things, sprained things, jacked up things, broken things. So barring surgery, which I've only had one, and that was for a really weird injury where I broke a bone behind my eye. But barring that, I don't know what the rehab from that's like because I haven't had it. But for all the non-surgical stuff, I've low back pain, hip pain, sciatic pain. I've probably had almost everything my patients have, and I know what they feel like, and I know how to get it better because I've gotten it better without surgery, and usually without PT, just by either stuff I already knew from having so much experience in the past, or from looking stuff up. Or I mean, I have had physical therapy a few times. So tore my hamstring and tore something weird in my shoulder where they wanted to do surgery, and it was right before my first nationals. And I went to two surgeons, and they're like, "Well, we don't know what's wrong, but we're going to cut you open and find out." I was like, "No, you're not." They gave me 2 cortisone shots that did nothing. Finally, they referred me to pain management, got a nerve block put in. I said, "I don't care what you do, make it stop hurting for 24 hours so I can do this thing. And then if I need surgery after, that's fine." It made it stop hurting, and I went to PT and rehabbed it over like 12 weeks after that and ended up not needing surgery. So,
Yeah, unfortunately, that's what surgeons' favorite thing are to do, and they like the knife. So
yeah, it's getting better though. I've definitely had surgeons tell like more active patients with less limitation, like people who are jacked up and can't do stuff working out, but like who don't have significant limitation in their daily activities, that like we don't want to do surgery right now. So that's good.
And I think even
slowly.
Yeah. And I think even speaking to that, you can say the same thing about surgeons, physical therapists, or strength coaches, or athletic trainers. Those ones that are probably involved in training and have practical experience, not just experience anecdotal from reading textbooks. They actually have firsthand got involved. Like you said, you've had injuries, so you can kind of guide your clients through them without having to resort to surgery. And I mean, that was a big reason why I got involved in strength coaching. After all my injuries, I wanted to kind of be a vessel to show athletes what not to do. And I'm the perfect duct tape version of that together of, hey, this is what not to do so that you can actually be successful, because I did not have the talent to play at a higher level. I don't have the ability to even kind of do what I'm doing. I just have a more experience and understanding. So I like that. I mean, practical experience is king, I think.
Yep.
So,
and on that, really quick list, I have torn muscles in both rotator cuffs, torn both labrums, torn both menisci and both knees. I have strained my low back, my calves. I've torn biceps. I've broken bones. I have strained an ab. I've had tendonitis in both elbows on inside and outside. I've jacked up my wrist, torn my TFCC, sprained my fingers. I mean, almost everything you can do, I've done. And I feel fine when I wake up in the morning. It's not like I wake up like, oh my God, I can't get out of bed. Like, if you strengthen it and rehab it and get it better correctly, then you can function as a perfectly normal human being. Like, one injury does not mean you're old. One injury does not mean like you can't do stuff anymore. And people come in and either they've talked to somebody who was like, oh yeah, I tore my meniscus and my knee was never the same, or I got that rotator cuff surgery and I couldn't do anything ever again. I was like, if that's the case, your rehab was jacked up. Now maybe, or the surgery was jacked up. I don't know. Something was messed up somewhere along the line, because you should be able to come back and do things basically at the same or better than you did them before. So,
right. Yeah. I think if you're going to compete at a high level, you're going to get those scars and you're going to have some war stories from it. And anybody that's going to let one kind of injury hold them back, and it's either an all or none principle where if you're going to let that one thing hinder your progress, you have an issue. Kind of touching on that stuff more, since you've been through all those kind of injuries, what have you done when you've been through your training, getting ready for a competition or something, and something happens where it hinders your training? What are some of the things you look to do to work around that and still be able to get training done without causing further damage?
First and foremost, I take my own advice. I didn't always take my own advice, and usually it makes it worse if I don't. Like, what would I tell somebody else in this situation? Okay, I'm going to do that. For instance, and I already told you this, I was training yesterday morning doing farmers walks, and I randomly pulled my right calf muscle. It wasn't bad enough that I dropped the farmers. I didn't feel anything pop. There was no which I have done before. I've definitely torn a calf and felt a pop and had to stop. But I mean, I finished the run. It was supposed to be a warm-up run. It was supposed to be 120 feet with a turn at 60. I stopped at 60 and dropped it. Got pissed off. Contemplated what to do. And then I was like, all right, well, it's away from my driveway. So I'm going to pick it up, and I'm going to walk with shorter steps so that because I didn't want to roll them back. And this was pushing my own advice a little bit, but I did the second run, same weight, same distance, no pain. I just was really, really slow and careful with it. And I couldn't try to go fast, and I knew I didn't want to do any more weight. So did that, and then changed the rest of what I was planning to do for the day because that would have made it worse. Did a little bit of conditioning, pushing and pulling the prowler didn't bother it, so I did some of that. And then I immediately started rehabbing today. I've done calf raises, straight leg and bent leg. I'm not stretching it yet because you shouldn't stretch an injury after you first injure it for a couple weeks while it's in the initial stages of healing. But I mean, I've been active on it. I tried to mow the lawn today, but about an hour in, it started raining on me. It's the first time I mowed my lawn in the new house. And it's like a jungle out there, and I'm not exaggerating. The grass is higher than my knee in some places. So I'll check the weather. There's 0% chance of rain. Start mowing my lawn. All of a sudden, thunder and lightning. No rain, not stopping. Keep mowing the lawn. Calf was actually feeling really good until I was backed up on a hill or downhill, and then drove up and kind of did a single leg calf raise, pushing the lawnmower uphill. That hurt a little bit. And then I did have to stop mowing the lawn once it started pouring that rain on me, which really sucked. But I started my rehab today. My calf feels great. Most of the time, not even aware of it except for that one misstep mowing the lawn. I think it was a minor injury. I'm basically going to do calf raises every day moving forward, just going through some range of motion with my ankle, make sure nothing tightens up. Just address it as soon as you can, if you can. There was definitely one time and only one time in any recent memory that I pushed an injury, but that was for Worlds, because training for Worlds, I only had, I think, 6 weeks to train after I won Nationals in 2018. And it was a very heavy Viking press for reps, obviously. And I was training it 3 days a week, and I hurt my rotator cuff. And I knew I hurt my rotator cuff, but it was before the competition, and I knew I needed to keep training. So I just did a lot of extra warm-up. Probably turned what would have been a 3-week rehab if I could have stopped doing Viking press into a 3-month rehab. But it was worth it because I did not bomb the event. And that was one of my goals going into Worlds, was don't bomb any events and embarrass yourself. So mission accomplished.
That's good advice. Yeah.
I basically just, as soon as I hurt something, figure out, do I need to keep going? If I don't need to keep going, stop and kind of do stuff that you can do without making it worse. If it's hurting, right after you do it, you're probably making it worse, especially if it's hurting more. If it's hurting in rehab a little bit, some pain is fine. Rehab's not going to be pain-free, but you don't want to push it to the point where you feel like it's getting worse or it's hurting more or you're able to do less, because then you're overdoing it. Or make a month-long schedule with 15 different rehab exercises every day, and your butt hurts more and more and more, because that's just embarrassing.
Yeah, I lived through that before.
You don't say.
Yeah, I think that was me. That was definitely me.
No, but you can't do rehab. Let me stress that. You can do too much of the good stuff, and I definitely have patients who do that. I'll say, do these exercises twice a day, every day, and then they do them 5 times a day, and that's too much. I might tell some people to do things 5 times a day sometimes, but if it feels like it's making it worse, you should know and you should listen to your body. Even if your therapist said do this, or your strength coach said do this, or your athletic trainer, or whoever, if it feels like it's making it worse, it probably is, and you should at least let that person know that it feels that way. So communication is huge. Definitely need to not just do things blindly because somebody said it. Like, I don't care if it's the most well-known PT in the world, or it's the strength coach for the NFL team, or whoever. Like, tell them how it feels when you do it, and that will be, you'll get better faster, you'll get stronger faster, you'll get back to doing what you want to do faster, and get out of rehab, or be able to play instead of being on injured reserve or what have you. So,
No, I like that. I think it's great advice. I wish I would listen to that a lot more, and I probably wouldn't be as injured as often or for as long. But I think that's a great thing. It's the same as the warm-up, and you kind of have to be able to individually adjust it to yourself. And as you either advance or get hurt or something like that, you have to find ways to know when is a good time to push it, know when is a good time to pull back. And just like your example, like going to Worlds, that was a time you're putting everything on the table. If you get injured more, it is what it is. But
well worth it.
Yeah, well worth it in that case. So I think it's important for everybody to be able to address it and then question if someone is giving you something, because I think we both would rather have more educated and more of our clientele involved in the process, and it not just being dictated down to them and they're just following it blindly. So
very much.
Yeah. So I know this whole year, besides Corona and all this nonsense, you've been even double busy with a new job, relocating to Virginia, and of course the birth of your first child. Could being a pro strongman, all your other obligations, work, family life, all those things, how are you able to continue to kind of sharpen the sword as a physical therapist, all right, as a strongman athlete, and still basically juggle all those things at once?
PT, I'm trying to stay on top of just reading research, like not necessarily every day, but definitely weekly at the very least. And just, stay on top of what's the most recent developments are, the most recent studies, like this works, this doesn't work, this still works, this used to work, and now we found a better way to do it, whatever. Where I work definitely is very helpful with that. My bosses are very big on helping us become better clinicians, and have been very helpful at exposing me to some different resources that I can take advantage of, especially now with all the kind of restrictions we're under, because a lot of in-person stuff is canceled or postponed, or nothing is near where I am right now, that I'm trying to take advantage of to learn more. So definitely take advantage of that. Doing as much online stuff, kind of some pre-recorded resources that other of the PTs that I work with have done in the past that are very helpful. Some of this stuff I've never heard of before. I was like, I don't know where you can do continuing ed for stuff with strength athletes. And they're like, oh yeah, there's this whole series on it. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Had no idea. So my bosses and the other PTs I work with have been really helpful in keeping me sharp on the PT front. On the training front, that definitely suffered a little bit over the last 3 months, because except for 2 weekends, I was out of town every single weekend for at least 3 months until a couple weeks ago, finishing up, moving everything down here, getting the old house ready to sell, that kind of thing. And everyone's like, oh, well, why did you have to keep going, getting more stuff? Well, where I used to live our driveway was really short, and the road was fairly narrow, and people parked on the sides of it. So I had to get small moving trucks, and also small moving trucks have a lower weight limit, and I have a lot of very heavy stuff. So I had to make a lot of trips because of that. And actually, I still have to get some equipment from Maryland still, but we're all out of the house. House is sold, the old house. So next time I can just get a gigantic truck and hopefully get it all in one go. But yeah, I was training only twice a week for almost 3 months, with a couple very enjoyable exceptions of getting to train with some of my friends down here. Now I'm getting back I'm up to 3 days a week, and hopefully going to add in that fourth day here pretty soon. The wee baby does make it a bit difficult on that fourth day sometimes. So still working out, trying to how to schedule that, especially with my wife about to start going back to work. But she's going back very part-time. So she's just going to work a couple weekends a month. But she has training all next week. So 5 days in a row. But our families have been coming down to help out. It is very helpful having a gym in my garage. I am horrified that I had a gym in my garage, but it was in a different state during all this. Thankfully, there's a lot of very good gyms around here. And even though they were closed down for a while, it wasn't too long, and I was able to find some places to train on lockdown, which I will not speak of.
Yeah, I hear you. No, I know you're really busy. You got a lot of stuff going on. So I know a garage gym and all that stuff really helps because you can set your schedule a lot better. I mean, competing priorities like that, the same as with training we talked about, you have to have a goal in mind, and some things are going to take a back seat. And with moving and going through all those different relocations and now the tiny one around, you got to figure out when you can sneak it in, but the rest of the time, the other things take priority. And that's just what it ends up being. So, hey, we end the show here with a finisher, just like any hopefully good training session. So we're going to go 4 quarters, 4 questions, and potentially overtime. Sound good?
Good.
So take as long as you want on them, or we'll lightning round them through however fast you want to do it. All right. So biggest influence in physical therapy or strength conditioning, and then biggest influence in strongman.
I'm going to say PT was probably Teddy Wilsey, who was my last clinical instructor in PT school. He is at Strength Coach Therapy on Instagram and works at Healthy Baller in Rockville, Maryland. He does things exactly the way that I knew I wanted to do them going into PT school, and I learned a ton from him. And that was definitely, of all my clinical experiences, the one most in line with how I work today. So shout out to Teddy. Thanks a lot. Hope you're doing well. And I want to come visit you. In terms of strength and conditioning or strongman, which one was it?
Yeah, strongman. What was the biggest influence or person?
Influence. That would have to be 2 people tied between my high school strength coach, which had nothing to do with strongman, but he would have loved all this. I wish he was around to see it. He passed away before I actually started doing strongman. And then Terry Mitchell at Virginia Tech, who was the first place I interned in strength and conditioning and who introduced me to elite FTS and powerlifting and box squats and bench shirts and squat suits. I've never actually worn a bench shirt, but he did. And it was kind of through him. He was very instrumental in getting me a better foundation in strength training versus just working out. So he is now no longer at Virginia Tech, unfortunately, or maybe he thinks it's fortunate. I don't know. Last time I saw him was when I was down there in 2012, and I need to kind of find out where he is right now and go visit him again, especially now that I'm back in his state.
There you go. you probably already answered it since you're so busy, but if you're not coaching or competing, what can you be found doing? What are some of your hobbies?
Right now, trying to figure out how to get everything straight in our house. We just had the house painted over the last 5 days. I was trying to mow our lawn for the first time today. Trying to get, we have one room in the house, one room that I would say is done, and that's the dining room, unfortunately, the room that'll probably see the least use ever. But just trying to, since we just moved into the house and it's a new house and new everything, just trying to get settled, and there's 10 million things to do. So every time I don't even ever think I'm done. I'm just like, all right, what's next? We got to hang a mirror up. I got to roll insulation in the walk-in storage so I can put in flooring so I can use the walk-in storage, so I can also insulate the garage gym better so that I don't need the dehumidifier as much and it's more comfortable in there. We need to widen the driveway. We need to get a shed so I can get the stuff that's not related to the garage gym out of the garage, because the only thing in the garage is supposed to be the garage gym. I need to get a grill and a smoker because we gave our old smoker to friends before we left, and our grill was rotten to the core and rusted, and I moved it and the leg fell off and it collapsed. So and I need to make money so that I can afford to do all these things.
Exactly. So, if not strongman, what sport do you think you would be involved in if you could pick
Paddle
any?
games, throwing stuff in the kilt is where it's at. And actually, with all the lockdowns on too many people being in one place, that may be the shift of my training focus soon. Because I was going to compete in September at a competition, actually literally at the gym where my physical therapy office is, but it had to get canceled because of our current COVID restrictions here in Virginia. So I don't know. Hopefully things will get back to normal soon, but if not, it's definitely easier to do stuff outside with a little bit fewer people than inside with 50 people and 30 workers and 2 spectators per person. So,
All right. Ideal. If you had to set up an ideal training day, what's your go-to PR music and what's your go-to post-training meal?
definitely going to be cranking Dropkick Murphys, and post-training meal has got to be sushi, although pizza's a close second.
I like it. All right. Last one, overtime. Most favorite or most memorable competition or training session in your career?
Competition, I'm going to say where I won my pro card. I did not win any event. I got straight second places across the board. I was just generally better than everybody else that day.
I like it.
And I lost the second part of that. Sorry.
No, that was it. Most memorable one.
Yep, that was it. And then the post-competition meal we had, that was in Orlando, Florida, which I've been to Orlando, but I've never been to Disney. And then we had steak at Charlie's Steakhouse, not to be confused with O'Charlie's, the franchise. And that was the second best steak. For a long time, that was the best steak I ever had. I had like a 10-ounce filet and a Guinness, or several Guinnesses. But that steak got surpassed by the steak they had at my wedding, which you had. That is now the best steak I've ever had in my life. And a number of people at that wedding said the same thing.
Yeah, I think I had a few drinks at that one too. So a few Guinnesses. That was good steak. No, but I could do any of those post-training meals. Hey, but again, Andy, you've been inspirational and you really helped me throughout my career when I first got started. I mean, we've been training partners ever since, even if it's most of the time it's been long distance, now East Coast, West Coast. But again, I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing some insight, physical therapy, strength conditioning, all that stuff, strongman, with our audience today. So I appreciate it again, man.
I'm honored to be here and happy to help, and can't thank you enough for everything you've helped me with over the years too. And hopefully one day we'll get to train again here soon.
I look forward to it, brother. Thanks again, man.
All right, bud.
See ya.
See ya.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors, Cerberus Strength. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.